Jeane is one of, if not the most mysterious character in the Suikoden series. I don't even know where to start, and I'll be honest, this video is probably going to leave you with more questions about Jeane than answers. So before we dive into the theories themselves, let's run over some quick series facts about her first. Jeane is the Suikoden world's step-on-me rune mistress. Just like Vicky, she appears in all of the mainline titles despite the games taking place over the course of 169 years. She's the most recurring character in the series, having appeared in Suikoden 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Suikoden Tactics, Suikoden Card Stories, Suikogaiden Volume 1, and in the Suikoden 4 Patchy Slot game. She also has the most cards in the physical Suikoden Card Stories trading card game with 10 different cards. Her hair is silver white, but she was given pink hair in Suikoden 5 so that players wouldn't mistakenly confuse her as being a member of the Falanen royal family. None of the investigators in any of the games have been able to find out a shred of information about her. She bears a unique rune called the Charm Rune, which charms and seduces the opposite sex. Jeane is the only character in the entire series to have this rune. Okay, now that we've gotten those little details about her out of the way, let's start getting into the theories. There's a few different theories fans have about Jeane. The first being that she's a true rune bearer. This is based on the fact that she doesn't appear to age between games, though this was denied by Fumi Ishikawa, the character artist for Suikoden 2 and 3, Suikogaiden 1 and 2, and Suikoden Card Stories. During an interview with Dengeki PlayStation in Volume 217, Fumi Ishikawa said about Jeane that she doesn't seem like she is aged at all, but she doesn't have a true rune. And during her bat scene with Lily in Suikoden 3, Lily inspects Jeane's body and finds no true rune. The next is the multiple genes theory. This theory started because in that same interview, Fumi Ishikawa said that apparently Jeane's family all have the same face. Fumi Ishikawa was implying that it's a different Jeane that appears in each game, essentially making her the Suikoden world's equivalent of Nurse Joy from Pokemon. Of course, this interview would cause fans to go wild with theories and speculation. But Fumi Ishikawa has been wrong about things she has said in the past. For example, she said that Hugo's father has black hair, which for nearly 2 decades, and still to this day, causes people in the fandom to incorrectly speculate about the identity of Hugo's father. Yoshitaka Murayama contradicted Fumi Ishikawa by saying in an interview with the Suikoden revival movement in 2016 that Hugo's dad has blonde hair, so Fumi Ishikawa was wrong about that. But while she was wrong about Hugo, was she wrong about Jeane too? Yes and no, and I'll explain why. She might be correct about Jeane not possessing a true rune, which is partially backed up by Jeane's bat scene with Lily in Suikoden 3. Lily inspected Jeane's body and found no markings or signs of a true rune. However, Jeane is hiding her true appearance. What we see isn't what she really looks like. Isn't it possible that whatever magic she's using to hide her real appearance, whatever illusion she has cast, would also hide any markings on her real body? So if she was bearing a true rune, it would be hidden alongside her real appearance, and all we see is what she's portraying herself as. So she may be incorrect about Jeane not having a true rune. But she was almost certainly incorrect about implying it's a different Jeane. Even if everyone in her family had the same face, same height, same body, same physique, same appearance in every possible way, is it not a little odd that they also have the same personality and the same memories? Her bat scene with Lily in Suikoden 3 talks about how she hasn't changed and Marlowe recognizing her. Jeane teasingly responds to Lily's question saying, "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't." But when Lily brings up that Marlowe stopped by the castle recently, Jeane gives away that she knows Marlowe by saying he didn't even offer a greeting or a handshake. Now, some people might interpret that as Jeane just teasing. But also in Suikoden 3, one of the letters she leaves in the suggestion box is talking about Futch, and she addresses him as an old friend. If they were different Jeans, why would she refer to Futch as an old friend? If he's an old friend, it has to be the same Jeane, as they fought together during Suikoden 1 and 2. She also leaves another letter about Nash. Nash and Jeane met previously in Greenhill during Suikoden Volume 1, which takes place during Suikoden 2. In Suikoden 4, Jeane has a bat scene with Vicky. Now, admittedly, this is open to interpretation, but the impression I always got from this scene was that Jeane very clearly recognised Vicky, and was simply trying not to let on that she knew anything, the same way she's always distant and vague with her answers. Vicky's letter about Jeane in Suikoden 5 basically confirms they've met many times before. Vicky leaves 2 letters in the suggestion box in Suikoden 5, one talking about Lorelei, swearing she's never met her before. The other letter is about Jeane. In the letter, Vicky talks about them having met before, lots of times in lots of different places. So she doesn't remember Lorelei, but she does know Jeane. So this can't be the Vicky from Suikoden 1, 2 or 3, or else she would also remember Lorelei. So Jeane and Vicky have definitely had multiple encounters that we've never seen in any of the games. Now, whether those encounters took place in the past, or in the future, or a mixture of both is another thing, but they certainly happened before Vicky's experiences in Suikoden 1, 2 and 3. Now, as I said, that bat scene from 4 is open to interpretation, but it definitely appears that Jeane was already familiar with Vicky. In Suikoden 5, Jeane asks you to help her recover something she left behind in a big hole that appeared north of Rainwall thanks to the magician Levi. Inside the big hole we discover a sealed entrance to an ancient ruin. An entrance that Jeane was able to open. These ancient ruins are from the ancient Armas dynasty, a nation that existed before Falena, and has been buried underground likely since before the foundation of Falena. The Queendom of Falena is roughly 700 years old by the time of Suikoden 5, but before the Queendom of Falena existed, it was the Sindar who inhabited Falena, and before the Sindar, it was the people of the ancient Armas dynasty who inhabited the land. So it was the ancient Armas dynasty who inhabited Falena first. Their king went crazy because of the Sun Rune and turned the whole land into a desolate wasteland, similar to what Queen Arshtat done to Lordlake, destroying his entire kingdom and killing everyone in it overnight. A few centuries after the destruction of the ancient Armas dynasty, the Sindar arrived and restored the land to life, and would settle in and inhabit the land for who knows how long before they continued to travel south. So we know that the Sindar didn't arrive until centuries after the ancient Armas dynasty was destroyed, thanks to Old Book Volume 4. But we don't know how much time passed between the departure of the Sindar and the foundation of the Queendom of Falena, nor do we know how long the Sindar inhabited Falena for. But we do know that the Queendom of Falena is roughly 700 years old by the time of Suikoden 5. So if we take the 700-year existence of the Queendom of Falena, and the centuries time gap between the destruction of the ancient Armas dynasty and the arrival of the Sindar, that means the ruins are at the absolute minimum 1000 years old at that point. They could be well over 1000 years old, or even far older. These ruins may have been buried naturally over time before the Sindar even arrived in Falena. So if it is a different Jeane in each game, why would Jeane want to recover something that she, in her own words, left behind? How would she even know it was there considering how much time had passed? And why was she familiar not only with the ancient Armas ruins, but also the story of their people? Quite a few people over the years speculated that Jeane holds a connection to the Sindar, but Suikoden 5 hints more at a connection to the ancient Armas dynasty. We don't know which civilization is older, but the ancient Armas dynasty predates the presence of the Sindar in Falena. I think we've established that it's the same Jeane, or at the very least, it's safe to say that it's the same Jeane. So now the question has changed. Is Jeane connected to the Sindar or the ancient Armas dynasty? Or perhaps she's connected to neither of them? The Sindar may be older than the Ancient Armas dynasty, but the Ancient Armas dynasty's presence predates the Sindar's presence in Falena by hundreds of years. Jeane could be a survivor of the Ancient Armas dynasty, but if she was a survivor of the Ancient Armas dynasty, shouldn't she be dead by now? That was over 1,000 years ago. Now, Jeane has been shown to be quite a powerful mage. Let's take Simeon from Suikoden Tactics, for example. A mysterious mage who is an acquaintance of Jeane's, and just like Jeane, Simeon has a youthful appearance, yet is far older than he appears, with tales and stories of his actions helping others, dating back many decades. Jeane showed familiarity with the Arma's runes, the story and history of the people, and she left something behind in the temple in the runes. When entering the runes, Jeane points to the temple in the center of the city's ruins and says that's their destination. Upon reaching the temple, she approaches what appears to be a sarcophagus, casts some kind of magic, and then tells the prince they can leave the ruins now. Later, Jeane asks to return to these same ruins, where we discover Erish, yet another mysterious mage with a youthful appearance that is an acquaintance of Jeane's, waiting at the entrance. Erish is a whole other can of worms, but to give her a somewhat quick rundown, she's a young-looking girl who wears the robes of a member of Nigeria's senior clergy. According to Oboro's investigations, that position is unavailable to people under the age of 40, regardless of their abilities. She's one of the most, if not the most powerful mage in Suikoden 5. She's very familiar with Jeane, calling Jeane her comrade, and just like with Jeane, she shows familiarity with the Ancient Armas dynasty. Not only that, but Erish is quite mysterious in her own way. She refers to her body as a vessel. When reaching the temple in the middle of the city's ruins, they discover an open passageway. A passageway that was hidden underneath the sarcophagus Jeane interacted with in your previous visit. Jeane comments that she's responsible for it being open, and Erish comments about needing to descend to the depths of the ruins. At the end of the ruins, in the throne room, they would face an enemy called Shepseska, who descended down onto the throne upon the group entering the throne room. Shepseska is possibly a shade or spirit of the last ruler of the Ancient Armas dynasty, and possibly a reference to Shepseskaf, the last pharaoh of the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom period of ancient Egypt, as we can see by the Ancient Armas dynasty runes being based on ancient Egypt. After defeating Shepseska, both Jeane and Erish would cast a spell and it would vanish. Erish would comment, "It ends," and Jeane asks, "Do you remember?" Neither Jeane nor Erish would elaborate on what happened, so with both Jeane and Erish not only being familiar with the Ancient Armas runes, but the history of the people, and being aware of Shepseska, along with their strange comments after defeating Shepseska, they both appear to have a strong connection to the Ancient Armas dynasty. Could they be survivors of the Ancient Armas dynasty? We've seen how powerful they are with magic. Neither are what they seem. How are they familiar with this knowledge on the Ancient Armas dynasty? After all, the Ancient Armas dynasty was destroyed overnight when the last ruler went crazy, lost control of the Sun Rune and burnt the whole land and everything in it to a crisp, turning the entire land into a barren wasteland. I would imagine most books, scrolls and knowledge of them was burnt and lost in time too. Though perhaps not everything, as Old Book Volume 4 was found in the ruins, and the contents of the book was a brief history of the Ancient Armas dynasty. But this book can't be from the Ancient Armas dynasty, as the book talks about the arrival of the Sindar centuries later, and the false claims of the New Armas Kingdom claiming to be descendants of the Ancient Armas dynasty. So does this mean that someone other than Erish, Jeane and the prince somehow found their way into the ruins in the last 300 years? But if they did, I imagine some kind of expedition, excavation or knowledge of the ruins to exist, which would have resulted in treasure hunters and looters. Unless of course the person who discovered it kept it a secret or got trapped inside and died. But it's more likely that it's just a game item relevant to the area to give some background and lore to flesh out the history of the world and give some story to the runes. But what did Erish mean when she said, "It ends"? And what did Jeane mean when she asked, "Do you remember"? Is Erish a lingering spirit of someone from the ancient Arma's dynasty? And what is her connection to Jeane? So that was a quick rundown of Erish, if you can call that quick. As I mentioned earlier, considering the centuries time gap between the destruction of the ancient Arma's dynasty and the arrival of the Sindar, it's possible that the ancient Arma's runes may have been covered and buried naturally over time, before the Sindar arrived. But since some people theorize that Jeane is a Sindar, let's for argument's sake say that she is a Sindar. And for that argument, let's say the runes weren't buried between the destruction of the ancient Arma's dynasty and the arrival of the Sindar. When the Sindar arrived, the land was still a barren, infertile wasteland. The Sindar may have buried the runes while restoring the land to life, and perhaps Jeane left something there when it was being buried. Now, that wouldn't explain why she's so familiar with the story and history of the ancient Arma's dynasty, but they may have interacted before. The Sindar were a nomadic people. According to Old Book Volume 2 in Suikoden 2, I spent my life chasing the secrets of the Sindar, but here in these ruins I've reached the end of my strength, and so I write some of what I have learned. The Sindar are a phantom race. They have been known throughout history, and their true nature is a mystery. They came from the north and travelled south, leaving mysterious runes behind them. Legends say the clan leader has a cursed rune inscribed on his forehead. It granted eternal life, but doomed the clan to a life of wandering. They say a secret treasure lies at the heart of the runes, but there are many traps, and most seekers find only death, like myself. The cursed rune the book is referring to is the Rune of Change, one of the 27 true runes. A rune that promotes constant change and doomed the Sindar people to a life of wandering, unable to settle and inhabit a single area for too long. The Sindar may have had some knowledge of or traded with the ancient Arma's dynasty at some point in the past before they settled in Falena. We know the Sindar travelled from north to south and that they had structures in the Tauren region. Hano-Yakuta Castle is built on top of Sindar ruins. The Sindar may have been in the Tauren or Kuluk region by the time of the ancient Arma's dynasty. If so, it's possible they could have traded with one another as they were only separated by the island nations. But that's complete speculation with no evidence whatsoever to back up, and it isn't enough to explain Jeane's clear knowledge of the runes, their history, Shepseska, her connection to Erish, nor is it enough to say definitively why she would leave something behind there. It appears unlikely that Jeane is Sindarin. Jeane's connection to the ancient Arma's dynasty is far stronger than her connection to the Sindar. The strongest potential connection Jeane has to the Sindar is that she's always on the move, never settling in a single area for long before travelling somewhere else. But that could be attributed to wanderlust, or some sort of connection to the true runes or stars of destiny, as she always ends up in a place of conflict involving a true rune. Or it could be attributed to a number of other reasons. I think it's safe to say she's not Sindarin, but may actually be a survivor of the ancient Arma's dynasty. Or she may even be older than the ancient Arma's dynasty itself. Now we have another question. What is Jeane? Is she even human? It's most certainly the same Jeane that's appearing in each game, but for whatever her reasons, she tries her best not to give away any information about herself, and is almost always vague in her answers, instead preferring to avoid questions by teasing and laughing. As I mentioned earlier, some people speculated she bears a true rune, but others speculate that she might be the incarnation of a true rune. People try to dispute this as a possibility by questioning whether a true rune is even capable of equipping a rune, so let's put this to the test. In Suikoden 1, Victor obtains the Star Dragon Sword, which is the incarnation of the Night Rune, one of the 27 true runes. If we go to a blacksmith, we can attach rune pieces to the Star Dragon Sword. Now, to be fair, those are just rune pieces, not actually full runes. So that's not exactly proof. So let's go to Suikoden 2, where Victor would once again come into possession of the Star Dragon Sword. Attaching runes to weapons was different in Suikoden 2 compared to Suikoden 1. While in Suikoden 1 you could only attach rune pieces, in Suikoden 2 you attach full runes to your weapons. So if we go to the blacksmith and select Victor, you can see that we can attach a full rune to the Star Dragon sword. So evidently, an incarnation of a true rune can in fact have a rune embedded into itself. Now that's not proof that she is an incarnation of a true rune, just evidence that it's possible. But what about her appearance? If she's the incarnation of a true rune, can a true rune incarnate in human form? The Night Rune incarnated as a sword. The Sovereign Rune manifested as a three-headed golden hydra. The Beast Rune took the form of a two-headed silver wolf. The Sun Rune manifested as a giant moth or butterfly, while the True Wind Rune took the form of a bird. With the exception of the Night Rune, these are all considerably sized creatures. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be such large sizes, as evident by the Night Rune becoming the Star Dragon sword. But we also know that Jeane's appearance is not what she really looks like. Kuroku during Suikoden 3 can apparently see Jeane's real form. And Rania during Suikoden 5, who can hear and interpret sounds that other humans cannot, mentions that Jeane has many sounds that are pure and beautiful, as opposed to that of other people who only have one sound. How she's masking her appearance, we don't know. However she's masking her appearance, she is quite a powerful mage, far more powerful than she lets on. During Suikoden Tactics, she rejuvenated Katarina from an exhausted state to full of energy in mere seconds and dismissed it as an old parlour trick. During Suikoden 5, the Godwinds attempted to extract the Twilight Rune from its bust, but the rune would not budge and refused to willingly take a host. However, Jeane was summoned to the palace, and she was able to remove the Twilight Rune from the bust and embed it into Elenia, against the rune's will. Zorase becomes outraged upon finding out Elenia bears the Twilight Rune, but she would immediately calm down upon Jeane admitting she was responsible for it. Jeane now showing to have connections to 3 other mysterious powerful mages. So with that all said and done, what exactly do we know about Jeane? Truthfully, not a whole lot. Sadly, this video doesn't answer many questions. In fact, it might even raise more questions for people. But at least it can help trim down the possibilities, and we can at the very least rule out the multiple Jeanes theory. As I discussed earlier, in the Dengeki PlayStation Volume 217 interview that Fumi Ishikawa had, she stated that Jeane doesn't seem like she has aged at all, but she doesn't have a true rune. Apparently Jeane's family all have the same face. But we've established that it's the same Jeane in each game, as evident by in-game scenes, letters and dialogue. So that rules out Fumi Ishikawa's comments that sparked the multiple Jeanes theory. We can at the very least put the multiple Jeanes theory to rest and rule that out. Fumi Ishikawa also said that Jeane does not bear a true rune. This is partially backed up by Jeane's bat scene with Lily in Suikoden 3, who was checking her out in the bat and saw no markings. However, Fumi Ishikawa has now been wrong about 2 things she has said. She was wrong about the physical traits of Hugo's father. She said he has black hair, while series creator Yoshitaka Murayama said he has blonde hair. And she was wrong about everyone in Jeane's family looking the same, as we've shown it's the same Jeane. So could she possibly be wrong about Jeane bearing a true rune? I say it was partially backed up and could be wrong because Jeane's appearance is not her real appearance. She's masking her true form. We don't know how she's masking her appearance, whether it's through a rune, a spell, or a trinket. But she is masking her appearance somehow. So if she is bearing a true rune, wouldn't whatever illusion she's casting to mask her real appearance also hide the true rune that's attached to her, along with any markings on her real body? That's not to say she does have a true rune, it's just a thought and we can't 100% rule it out. And as unlikely as it is to be, we can't completely rule out the possibility of her being an incarnation of a true rune, as we've shown thanks to the Star Dragon sword that true runes can have regular runes embedded into them. Although that brings to question the charm rune. Do true runes have genders? Because Jeane is very clearly female, and the charm rune only appears to be able to seduce the opposite sex. Again, unlikely, but we can't 100% rule it out. She's unlikely to be Sindarin, as there's virtually no evidence to suggest this whatsoever except speculation based on wishful thinking. But while unlikely, it's not impossible. There's no evidence at all to say that she is Sindarin, but there's also no evidence to definitively say that she's not. Although, if she was a Sindar, that might explain the need to mask her appearance, as if the statues in the Sindar runes in Suikoden 2 are anything to go by, the Sindar might not even be human, and may in fact be a race of snake people based on Lamias from Greek mythology, which were half serpent and half human. Though this could merely be a reference to the two-headed snake which is the guardian of the runes. It's also partially disputed by Old Book Volume 6 in Suikoden 5, which makes claims that the Falanan royal family are descendants of the Sindar, though these claims are unsubstantiated and could be nothing more than Falanan nationalist propaganda. Suikoden 5, however, points to Jeane having strong connections to the ancient Armis dynasty, although that isn't to say definitively that she is from the ancient Armis dynasty, nor does it explain her agelessness or her appearance. Unless similar to Erish, she may possibly be a spirit of some kind. Or it could be a Melisandre Game of Thrones situation, where she's actually an old hag with the illusion of a young, beautiful appearance, thanks to a magical trinket or spell. There are other potential theories, of course. She could be a being similar to that of Peshmerga and Uber. She could be from another world. She could be a surviving member of an ancient race, far more ancient than the Sindar and the ancient Armis dynasty. Maybe none of these theories are correct and the real answer is something nobody has even thought of yet. However, people need to stop taking Fumi Ishikawa's word as gospel. She's an incredible artist and her art is peak Suikoden. Her beautiful character art is part of the reason why so many people fell in love with the series. But when it comes to Suikoden lore, she has been wrong before. She was wrong about Hugo's dad, she appears to be wrong about Jeane's family, and she may very well be wrong again about Jeane possessing a true rune. But it's also possible that her answer about Jeane in the Dengeki interview was a misdirect or intended as a joke. If you read through the other interviews she has done about Suikoden with Dengeki, which I'll link in the description below, she spends a lot of the interviews goofing and joking around, so her answers may have been said in jest, or to deflect people away from the truth to keep the mystery alive. This video has probably raised more questions than answers for you, but the truth is we just don't know enough about Jeane, and frankly we may never know the truth about Jeane. So unless Konami decide to continue the series by making new entries, we may never find out what her story is, what her purpose is, what or who she is. So get out there and wishlist and pre-order the remasters because we all want this series to continue, and for the series to have any chance of continuing, the remaster needs to sell well. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts and theories on Jeane? What or who do you think Jeane is? If you have any suggestions for Suikoden theory or discussion videos you'd like me to make, or just videos in general that aren't Suikoden related, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next video.